So how was the experience with the American comics? I know we talked about the color and the art a little bit, but as far as, reading it in comparison to the stuff you read all the time, like how'd you feel about that? Did you have problems going left to right?
I did actually, yes, I did. I did initially have a problem with that. Like I was very confused for the first page, and then I remembered, oh yes, it's American. And then a few pages later, because manga tends to have this, like a first few pages sometimes have a color, and then it just kept on going. And for a moment again, I was very confused. Like, is this gonna be fully colored? I know there is I think it's a Korean form that's kind of similar to manga. I can't remember what it's called, but that is fully colored.
Manhwa?
But yeah, I think so. It's some,
So what Solo Leveling is this, right?
yeah, solo leveling is this. And I think there is a version of God of High School in that kind of coloring, but that I think is Japanese. But still, it was the. I did really like the. I think my feelings with the color is. I think it's best explained if I give an example. There is the scene in Attack on Titan. Spoilers to everyone, where Armin essentially becomes a nuclear device and explodes a harbor, and the black and white is really touching, but it is when you get that color in the animation version where it's really like it really reminded me of that video of Oppenheimer going, I have become death, the destroyer of worlds. Like there is a more emotional connection with the color. And I do feel like, especially since this is very detailed art, but it is still not level of something like Berserk.
For
But I
sure.
feel like the color helps alleviate that. Like it gives you that emotional connection that you would normally get from the stunning amount of detail. But at the same time, it's not too busy, like Berserk sometimes can be very busy. So I think it's the color was probably the biggest like shock to me, like how much it affects the reading experience. And of course, there are other differences like the character style, manga and anime, very much more cartoony, whilst this is
Yes.
trying to be far more like realistic. And of course, there's more realistic manga as well, but that's not the norm.
Right.
Whereas I think this is the norm with American comics, that it is very sort of realistic.
More or less, definitely more on that side than you know, people getting punched through 8 mountains and,
Yeah,
oh, my shirt's not even ripped. So, but yeah,
yeah,
very very much more. And I think that's a good point with the detail level between the two, to compare and contrast both sides of the coin. Um, Manga definitely, because it's in black and white, I think it lends itself to adding more detail easier and
yeah,
really filling out those pages. The good artists, the good creators really fill out those pages and pad in things and give you plenty of detail in the background, or even just if it's a character splash page, the
yeah,
color can kind of cover up some of the less detailed things with the shading. But in manga,
yeah,
those black and white pen strokes are just they're good, man. They hit right sometimes.
yeah. And I feel like manga needs that more, and then it allows you to like with color you can play a lot with lighting and stuff.
Yeah.
And in manga, I feel like it's a very difficult thing to do unless you're Junji Ito or someone. But it's like I very much like to see since they do play a lot with colors, shading, the warmth of colors, that sort of stuff. And I feel like I get the same thing from manga, but in a very different sense, since you have those amazingly detailed, like full page images, and then they might do the same effect with lack of detail rather than lack of light or lack of saturation in color, which I found very fascinating.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. I love it though. I appreciate the differences of the coin, and I think
Yeah.
that they both have their strengths, and it's fun to be someone that flips between them a lot, and you can really
Yes.
see and explore. And the last person I had on this, they were a comic person. I had them read My Hero, the first volume of My Hero, and so kind of culture shock the other way. And so they had problems
Yeah.
reading from like right to left. And but one thing they kept bringing up is like, man, the art is so dynamic. Like the fights are dynamic. Like there's
Yeah.
motion in the pages that doesn't always get conveyed in American comics when you have that color over it, or just the difference of art style of how it's drawn. It doesn't lend itself and doesn't give the room for those really aggressive, detail oriented punches and throws and
Yeah,
things like that.
absolutely. And if you go all the way to the other side of like the dynamic of manga drawing, you get someone like Tatsuki Fujimoto, who draws things like Fire Punch or Chainsaw Man. Like he knows how to play with the page and like layouts and everything. And that's at least not in Wonder Woman. I didn't really get that sense, since a lot of manga do play with layouts and stuff to create that sense of motion in just the way the images are laid out on a page. But of course, Fujimoto being probably the best one to do that.
He might
But
be.
it still didn't feel like there weren't that many like big fights in
Mhm.
the Wonder Woman, but it still felt dynamic, but it was more stationary, weird. Of course, it's all stationary, just images, but
Yeah, no, for sure. And a lot of the paneling, I think, in Immortal Wonder Woman was pretty basic, very
yeah,
conservative. They didn't really try to go out. If you like, Miles Morales has a series out right now for Spider-Man, and that artist and creative team do a really good job of breaking panels and making it a lot more fluid, as opposed to kind of the strict three on the top, two going
yeah,
down, and kind of that box style that I think we got in Immortal Wonder Woman for the most part. I think part of that shows Jim Partel's inexperience with doing interior artwork for a whole book.
yes,
Like I said, she's very much a cover artist that hops on the interiors very sparsely.
yeah. But at the same time, I feel like there is certain strength in that cover arty thing, because it is the level of detail is more than I'd expect. Like, of course, my point of comparison is the 40K comics from the Western side of things,
Right.
but they tend to be more, I don't want to say lacking in detail, but it's not quite that, like, there isn't that depth between the background and the characters that was in Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
It's more like character, and then there's just something in the background.